Welcome. We are here with John Arenas, who's the CEO of Serendipity Labs, and he is new to the Everything Coworking platform as a podcast guest. John, I think we're overdue. We're thrilled to have you here. We'd be hard pressed to find somebody with the deep experience that you have in leadership roles in the industry. So you have seen a lot. We were just talking a little bit in our pre-record about your perspective on what's happening in the market today. And I was like, but you've been through some cycles. So we're looking forward to hearing some of that wisdom. Thanks for making time to do this.
Yeah, thanks, Jamie, and thank you, Gio. It is, yes, a lot of experience, some of which I hope I've learned from, and certainly trying to stay well preserved here and continue on. So, lots to talk about, lots new, lots to look forward to.
Okay, so for
Yeah,
somebody,
so
Gia's going to dive in.
go ahead.
Well, I was just going to ask for if there's anybody who's not familiar with John and his background. John, give us the quick story and your kind of rundown on your experience in the industry and where you are today.
Yeah, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible, but start out as a civil engineer working for Turner Construction, building office buildings. So I've been at this a while. And then a suburban office building. So that's kind of a passion, as you know, if those of you know me. Then moved on to Citicorp Real Estate after business school, doing lending for office buildings, and then workouts for lending for office buildings. And then I worked for a real estate developer, yes, doing office buildings, and then also a shared workplace. That was in the mid 90s, and then started a company called Community Business Centers in South Carolina that transformed into a company later known as Stratus Business Centers, which is a lot like Office Evolution, a franchise model of individual operator profile, and we operate in 11 states, and then got acquired by Regus, ran the Americas for them as president and GM, left and created Worktopia, which is a full stack software as a service technology company backed by DFJ Venture Capital, and connected that into 86,000 hotels for booking meeting space and group guest rooms, and then sold that in 2011, and with the idea of creating hospitality, a workplace is a hospitality brand, when that was a novel concept, at least to me. And so we said, well, let's become a trusted network for knowledge workers in suburbs and secondary markets as a good choice about how to work, escape the home office, refute the commute, and live a better life where you can choose how you want to work. And that was we'll say the dream of Serendipity Labs. And the name, some like it, some are confused, but serendipity obviously is coming back into vogue, where having a serendipity engine where people can get together, have those incidental opportunities to enjoy one another and learn and maybe come up with something they wouldn't have otherwise. That's really what we're trying to do for trusted knowledge workers, and have been doing that. I have 30 something locations in the US and in the UK, growing maybe 15 locations this year, and starting to have a good time again.
Yeah, there's definitely been a shift in how business is done, right? You just gave a career that spans 30 years ish.
Yes. Yeah.
And 20 of that plus has been in the workspace, right? And so how it shifted from then to today, and certainly in the last 5 years with the pandemic and everything. Even Serendipity Labs has been through a shift in your strategy of growth, right? You mentioned you've got a background in franchise side, and that's kind of part of how you started S Labs, and it's kind of had to shift and adjust with times, right? And so you kind of want to talk about, from an executive standpoint, how we'll just call it the last 5 years, how there's been a shift in how people work with, going the pandemic, going into the financial crisis, and kind of where we are today.
So, when we started Serendipity Labs, we were evangelizing this future state of work, but that we thought would happen in like 3 or 4 years, maybe 5. And all of our models predicted that, we'd have all these locations with people working close to home, but not at home. And the reality is that the way people were working 10 years ago and 5 years ago was really constrained by a few myths. The myths of not being able to maintain culture, not being able to maintain technology, connection, losing productivity, all those things I think all those myths got blown up. So, and not in a good way, so those don't exist those exist as concepts that certain, let's say, vintage of manager wants to hold on to, because that's the way they know how to manage, is to manage people in a seat where they can look at them. And that's the difference, I think, that with those myths being blown up. Now, with an entire workforce liberated to work how they want to work for a 2-year period, it's hard to put that back together. But I think there was also a lot of effort, sincere effort, on major companies in particular, trying to figure out how to manage that, put the technology in place, put the management schemes in place. It's taken a while to roll it out because they have long-term lease liabilities, long-term commitments, but that is starting to happen now. We're really starting to see that move. So I think the addressable market is much bigger than we ever could have imagined. The kind of the awareness from all of those who were blocking it, those IT departments, HR departments, managers, that's gone. It's just a matter of facing the future. And I think, some will age out, and we'll get there, and some will hang on, and it'll take a little longer. But so that's why I say there's so much opportunity. In terms of a business model for us or for our industry, I think thinking of ourselves as an outsourced workplace is kind of a really good framework, as opposed to just hospitality, space, desks, because outsourced workplace kind of gives people and users, in fact, kind of a way to work in a way that's just another node on a network in their corporate set of places to work. And so being able to do that is, I think, where the future is. One other maybe commentary on kind of the evolution of what's next is, landlords thought that they wanted to get in the business themselves. Some did. Some said, I'm going to do pre-built suites because that's my go-to move for any challenge in a cycle. And I think what's happening is that our industry is very well suited to being the service provider to those landlords, to, even if it's pre-built suites, branded, managed pre-built suites with a marketing funnel on top, taking over operations as needed that landlords try to do themselves, but then realize they're not really well suited to. So lots of opportunity. The addressable market's bigger. There are some challenges because, landlords are constrained right now. And until there's a big reset, which is happening, as it did in 1992, and then in 2008, and all the other times I've seen it happen, that it's coming, and it's a good thing for us.
I love hearing your perspective because you've been through the cycles. Do you feel like maybe you have more of a sense of like Zen because there's another side to it?
Well, yeah, I think there's a little bit of that. I mean, although the pandemic, nobody could have ever
predicted that.
The magnitude of that, and the kind of also the impact on the psyche of just every human being, and the loss. So that was a bit different. But I think knowing to trim your sails, cut costs, stop growth, just batten down the hatches and point into the wind. I think that's the kind of thing that you want to know to do early, because those who were caught out kind of hoping that things would turn around and continuing to grow and continue to raise capital, it didn't really pan out as well for them. So so I would say there's if you're in a situation, it's good to have an experienced team with you, and I'm lucky to have an experienced team with me.
John, I'm curious about your perspective on, you talked about the total addressable market. I feel like we're in this kind of time period where we know it's coming. Have you started to see it? And I love your outsourced workplace framing. It sounds like your team is trying to think about, right, how do you frame it? How do you help that new end user, the enterprise company who just has not really, to some extent, been a customer? And I know your brand positioning is maybe more for those, a more professional environment. The work near home, you had already sort of been on that path before COVID. But yeah, how are you thinking? Like, what do you see coming? And yeah, how are you thinking about that market, and how far out do you think it is before the sort of the tipping point of them seeing that opportunity as the outsourced workplace?
Right. Well, I would say that we keep thinking we're seeing it and it's a mirage up until about 6 months ago, I would say, because we had this. There are iterations of a lot of the corporate planning process, and there was always a reason to forestall the plan and not take the risk, whether it was the kind of employee-employer balance of power or potential recession or war in Ukraine or inflation or any of those things gave pause to these plans. Now, the good thing is they have gone through so many iterations that when they do get a green light, they'd move forward. And so we are seeing, more demand, more not just shopping, but actually plans that are out for execution than we've ever seen. And certainly, really, in the last 3 or 4 months is when we've started to see it. So I think it's here. Maybe that's a leading indicator to see a lot of the corporate moving. I would say on the other side, the medium-sized businesses and SMEs that really sustain the industry, I would say, for in large part because those companies stuck around, have learned also they need less space. So our average deal size for what would have been a 6-8 workstation requirement for 6 or 8 people is now a 2-3 workstation requirement for 6 to 8 people because those companies have learned. And also work from home, people have learned and set themselves up in a way, and technology and bandwidth has improved. And the stigma of working outside of an office has certainly fallen away. We're seeing a totally different kind of use from those people who would have been working from home and felt like they needed a 1 office or 2 office arrangement or even a full-time co-working versus a part-time drop-in membership. So that's on the other side of it. And then there's whole new things like we have a couple of major corporate customers who are using us only for meetings, and they've gotten out of their regional offices. So their regional offices where they might have had 20,000 feet or 10,000 feet, they're just getting out of them. And we're seeing a lot of what we would call team hubs where it's 20 desks for 80 people. We have one now that we're, hoping to win that's, 110 desks for 800 people. That's a very big addressable market change when we're competing not with 5,000 square foot, traditional office space. That used to be our competition. Now we're competing to win 100,000 square foot downsizing, that's why it's so dramatic. And I think everyone has permission to try right now. So.
Yeah, I mean, so go ahead. Sorry.
I was just going to say on the other side with landlords, that's the end user side. I mean, we have 2 customer kind of segments or kind of pillars. One is the end user and their sponsors, the company they work for, and the other is the landlords, the asset owners, and they too have realized they're in the flexible office space business because they have been renewing their tenants for, instead of 5 years, they've been renewing it for 1 year. They've had to put new tenant improvement allowances in to keep people. It's a market share preservation game for office asset owners. And those who are thinking a little bit forward are saying, you know what, I believe in this asset. My debt is low enough. I'm going to just go all in and do much more flex, not necessarily a full service flex operation and co-working, but maybe manage pre-built suites, maybe a really more fulsome shared tenant amenity set. And they can get money for that if they've got the right debt position. So that's a bigger addressable market. I mean, think back, the 3 of us, we know 5 years ago, talking to a landlord about anything other than a straight lease with a letter of credit. Believe me, we did all that hard work trying to convince them, but now they're coming to us and saying they're smart, they have a consultant at their side, they have a good, representation, and they know what they do an RFP and they stack them up. So I think all those things are good for the industry.
Yeah, so I think this is good. And the question I was going to ask is, you mentioned you've got a dozen plus locations you'll open this year. Not necessarily getting into the weeds on what the deal structures look like, but also, but really more how many of those are takeovers versus new builds, how many are new construction versus, you know, an existing building that you're reusing second generation space to whatever extent. I mean, I think that's all super helpful to really understand how your growth is fueled.
I mean, I think we went into this year before the kind of the say the $1 trillion of equity got wiped out of the office building category, thinking that we were going to continue to do a fair share of our growth in new build, meaning either first or second generation, but tearing down out an entire floor and starting over and building our brand, which is kind of what you think you see in back of you as your backdrop right there. But it's really about 25% of what we're doing this year. The rest is really conversions. There are only so many conversions to do, but those conversions have the benefit of the landlord already having their capital in place for the most part, and therefore there's more flexibility. On the other hand, they have some experience that they may wish they hadn't had through the pandemic with an operator that didn't perform, or a situation with a perfectly good space but just a bad set of circumstances. And so they have some constraints. So the growth for the rest of this year in the US and the UK, I'll call it half a dozen new build locations. The balance are conversions, and the deal structures are kind of the same for both. Some pure management agreements, some revenue share. We did break our cardinal rule and we signed a lease this year. What fun. I still, we'll see what happens. No, I'm just kidding. It'll be great, but it was a really good location. It was a takeover, so there's no capital risk and no recourse, but still a lease arbitrage. So we did it. What can I tell you? All the brokers are going to be saying, "Oh, they're going to be calling me." Anyway, so that's kind of the growth pattern. Now, how do you fill the funnel for next year? It's going to be tough because conversions will have been done that could have been done. And so I think a lot of what next year is where assets have traded, there's a new investor basis and maybe a little new equity capital in. Those asset owners are going to want to do pre-built suites. They're going to do shared tenant amenity. They need someone to operate both those things because they don't have the funnel. When I say the funnel, they don't have the digital platform marketing power and central sales and corporate account sales to fill those. Anyone can build pretty space, especially landlords, but really making it the right mousetrap and putting the right funnel on it is something that people in our industry can do for them. And I think that's the huge opportunity, I think, for next year. So we're starting to, where we're talking to landlords who have said, "Hey, John, I don't think we want to do the full service flex. We just don't have the $120, $130 a foot to do it, but we have this already approved pre-built suites plan. Could you help us? Can you manage that for us?" And so that's kind of a whole product line extension for our industry, where landlords used to say, "Look, I'll just do it myself. It's fine. It's easy. How hard could it be?"
Yeah, no, without a doubt.
Do you feel like you cannot say that enough? The customer acquisition piece. I think, we see the same thing, the attention of the asset owner, to your point, 5 years ago, it was like, they just aren't out there, and so much more inbound. And I feel like that's I try to just how do you, get that point driven home that the customer acquisition piece is, there's a lot to be said for the operations and hospitality. And I know your team, puts a lot of effort into that experience. So that aside, it's how do you get the humans into the space? It's a major competency.
It is. It took us a long time, and that's just how it is. You have to be of a certain scale to be able to have a digital footprint of a certain size to generate, like in our case, 75% of inquiries come from our central marketing, another 10% to 15% from our corporate account team. Local marketing, which is brokers and events, is 15%. So, if that's all you're playing with as a landlord, and you're trying to fill up your location, and by the way, be competitive and actually transact, it's really tough to do without that funnel every operator that's out there that's kind of, has any experience at all, has connected to third-party distribution systems and to, just even managing the lead flow of various drop-in day pass use vendors. And there's a lot. And I think what it is they don't really understand that it's a lot. They think it's property management and leasing and how hard could it be. And so we show them the data and we say, like, this is this is the total contract value that we generate from these things that you don't have. And by the way, your competitor, if you're going to open this as yourself, your competitor is someone who has this funnel. What are you thinking?
Yeah. So one of the numbers you dropped, was about, so 15% come from brokers in your network. I typically have gone off of 5 to 7. So
I would say total contract value is probably 50% because it's 5% of really monthly recurring, of the deals, but they're bigger deals, tend to be a little bit bigger deals. So that's why I think back in the day, 20 years ago or whatever, at Regus or whatever, it was about 20%.
yeah.
So yeah, 15% is kind of where we are. But again, if you're the asset owner and you're relying on that local broker marketing you're going to be waiting around to fill up. And just the quality, like we aggregate, people who use third-party distribution have their own corporate account teams, aggregate very high credit quality deals that local brokers don't really see.
Yep.
Until they're done. Really.
Well, it varies by market, right? There's some markets that I'm working in currently they're just unsophisticated brokers that don't understand the flex market, right? They don't understand the flex world. They don't understand the need for it. And so, I'd have no problem saying, I mean, like Vegas is one, right? We've been looking for 10 months in Vegas and and it's a smaller broker network and none of the brokers are bought into the need and importance of flex, right? And so like that, it varies what market you go into. I saw you get
yeah. I mean, it's a little bit shocking sometimes because we're in our own echo chamber where it's just like live and breathe this stuff, and and most of the people we talk to are our partners or vendors or landlords or customers, and
who are drinking the same Kool-Aid.
Exactly. So we opened a location under management agreement, a new build Serendipity Labs in a tower in Buffalo, New York. Okay. During the pandemic. It's like 90 something percent occupied. We've got EY in there. We've got EA in there. We've got, I don't know. We just have such a high credit quality in there. What's happened is the brokerage community kind of got it after a lot of education awareness. We've also opened in Rochester, New York at a similar type building, in the old Xerox tower there. And it was as if, we were from another planet. And even the asset owner, I think, sorry, Evan, but even the asset owner was like, well, can't you just help me fill up my other space in my building? We're like, no, you hired us to fill this up. And, nobody's really quite getting it yet. It's not a per square foot thing. Anyway, so there's a lot of education in secondary markets, less so in suburbs of major metros because, everyone's done deals. I think the great thing is, and we used to rely on the junior broker who would be willing to, spend their time because they weren't working on a 20,000 square foot lease. Well, aside from renewals, which are kind of not as profitable these days because they're shorter, everybody could benefit from, 100 workstation deal, I think. Every broker.
100%. Gio, I'll stick up for your former AY counterpart who just moved to Vegas, he's in our cohort for Flex Fluency. So you should have a buddy. Graham. I think it's Graham. Yeah, John.
Yeah, he's new.
He is new, but he's getting it. He's picking up what we're putting down. So yeah, I mean, Buffalo, that's a great win because that's a great example of, I mean, there was almost no supply there, right? And to open during the pandemic and to sort of teach that market, that's a big win.
Our new lab opening team is 14 people. And, so that's being able to land loudly and activate in a market. And it still takes time. And we still say 18 months to stabilize.
Yep.
but it can happen sooner.
Yeah.
I say 18 to 24, and I've
Well,
only had a few in Austin, Denver that have done it in less than a year, right? And sometimes you get lucky depending on the market and if there's enough demand and limited supply. But yeah, for the most part, I use 18 to 24.
well, also because, and this is a finer point for any operator listening, but seasoning the revenue is important too, because everyone does bigger deals at cheaper prices to get occupancy and to get pricing power, which is smart. I mean, that's what you do. But then you have to churn that and you have to season that revenue and maybe get a better mix, fewer big chunky lumpy deals and really get to a sustainable kind of a resilient revenue stream. And that is harder. And certainly I don't know that many landlords think about it that way at all. It just wouldn't occur to them how you do it.
So, you talked about the total addressable market being larger. I'm curious, you've been doing this for a long time. What keeps you excited about this industry? What keeps you here?
I guess it's just that, we're almost there, I've been at this for a long time saying, since I could show you the brochures from Stratus Business Centers 5 years ago, and they're saying a lot of the same things. Maybe I'm just,
sunk costs. You're not leaving until we get there.
It's the one thing I know how to do, so I keep doing it. No, but it really is. I think what keeps me at it, and it's fortunate this way, is that we've got a great team of people who I've worked with for a long period of time. Some of them 20, 25 years, some 10 years, some 15 years, and they know what they're doing, and that's amazing because we can exercise our talents and get to new places that a large organization has a hard time doing. And we can be creative and we can try things and we can call ourselves out. And, we get together every 6 months and do truth telling, which is like, what do we say about ourselves that isn't true anymore? Those kinds of things are very important. In a large organization where you have big investors and big capital behind you, it's hard to be honest because you start to convince yourself, you start to believe your own PR, I guess is what happens. And so being with people that can call you out because they've known you a while is helpful. But I think that's part of it. It's always changing. Technology is always changing. The product's always changing. I don't get 30 cents a minute for long distance anymore. $5 a fax.
Right.
That was a long time ago.
Those were the glory days.
That was a long time ago. Yeah, but we had other stuff we couldn't sell, but anyway, so I think it's a creative process. My wife, I've been married for 30 years, almost 30 years now. And, my wife has gone through living with an entrepreneur. She has her own business too, but, I try and tell her sometimes, like, it's like being an artist a little bit. I mean, it's a creative process. No one really necessarily understands you, and it might pay off, but maybe it doesn't, but you got to enjoy producing the art. And like, we have a lot of responsibility, fiduciary responsibility, legal responsibility to employees, to contractors, everybody. So it can be burdensome or could weigh on you, but I think everybody knows your sincere interest is in always making a better product and continuously innovating. That makes it fun for everyone to be part of it, I think, including our team and members, and see where we're going.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned your team earlier and you just did again right now. So, I mean, I know that you've got a really seasoned team that's been with you for some time, or you've brought out of the industry. You kind of want to share kind of who your key pillars are on the team that help you kind of day to day.
Yeah, so I'm going to go through a little bit of a laundry list, but so Mike Johnston was head of operations, but he runs procurement and construction. He's been with me since Stratus in 1996. So that's a pretty good long while. We didn't have kids when we met, and all of our kids are grown now. Got Vinay Kantak, who is the CTO of Worktopia, which is a technology company that we did. We connected into all those hotels, and he built our platform and keeps our platform running with a team in India and here. Simon Moore, who is I guess he's the original article. He had a summer internship when he was 14 working for Regus and never left, and he's 40 something now. So, and he's with us doing business process improvement, special projects, and really, I would say, leading the business operation. So that kind of rounds out some of the OGs on our side. Paula Gomprecht was from Starwood. She's been with us almost 10 years now. And yeah, we do have a young, to me, everybody's young now, but in a late 30s, early 40s crew that's come up through middle management, really from the location level up through middle management. Everybody's kind of moved up through the business, and they're running. Melissa Cates started out working in a location, and she runs operations in the U.S., all operations, field operations. So, and all of the locations report to her, and she just has earned that role. And she's kind of got an old soul, and we love that. So she's gets things done. But yeah, so it's a small. I had a couple of other CEOs of, we'll call them venture-backed companies, ask me where all my people are. And I said, well, you don't need that many people. Sometimes, if you've got great process and you have great people, and we invested in the process too, our systems.
I have a ton of respect for brands, where I should say the OGs who have been doing this for so long, because I see newer operators scale as if they're sort of inventing, the model. And that's not the case, right? You've been doing this for so long. IWG Regus has been doing this for so long. And there are things that work, right? Like, like the funnel is a great example. Like the sales process, when you've been running that and you have people who it's not new, and what works, and you've experimented a bunch of times, and you've won and you failed. And now you're just kind of like looking at the market and, where's the opportunity versus having to like grow everything from scratch. I mean, what a great position to be in. And have people who have been on that ride with you, I mean, for so long. That's right, a real like gift for an entrepreneur, right? To have that. Yeah. And says a lot for your team too, and your culture to keep people for that long.
Yeah, I think I also believe in what we're doing. I mean, we are doing more than renting desks. I think, we had always believed that we were creating, inspirational workplaces to give people a good choice about how they want to live their lives. And that's, what we used to write about a lot. No one really understood what we were saying. I think they understand a bit more now, but, being able to be a better, community member. I mean, I don't mean in the lab, we call them labs, but in the location, but community member, serving in your community, being part of your family in a way that maybe you weren't able to be before, just being a more complete person than, someone who's on a train and in a cubicle and then on a train and then, wiped out. So that's a pretty good service if you can give it.
So as you look at the next 6 to 12 months, what excites you?
I think what excites me is a level playing field. Aside from all the opportunity, the addressable market, and ultimately being able to branch out into new products with managed pre-built suites, I think the level playing field helps a lot. We don't have the irrational behavior of overfunded competitors who were what we used to call ourselves when I was at Regus 20 years ago. We used to call ourselves enthusiastic amateurs. Mark Dixon, Bob Gaudreau, and myself. That's kind of, look, we're trying. We don't know. We're trying to figure our way. But that can have a lot of collateral impact, especially when overfunded and growing too fast. And so I think with let's say, the rationalized market, we can do things that make sense and we compete. There's no way to, ever get to margin when your competitor is selling below cost and, and paying double commission and doing all kinds of stuff. So I'm happy about that. I don't think there's going to be a big influx of venture capital into this industry anytime soon. But there may be some quote consolidation, but I don't know. It doesn't really excite me that much. I don't, it's where we can all go to like have more inventory. Instant Group used to talk about trying, and they probably still do, talk about having, hundreds of millions of square feet of inventory in a marketplace. That's really cool. Now, being able to buy in that marketplace, that might be the next thing that happens. I tried to do that in 2004. I think it was a little early with Worktopia.
So outside of work, what is it that you enjoy?
Yeah, I raised a family. My wife and I, we enjoy each other quite a bit. But I get out on the water, as I was asking about fishing, and I've got a couple of places where I do that in South Carolina and up here on Long Island Sound. And depending on the season, what's migrating through, that's a lot of fun. So yeah, and I get to have, work is my creative passion too. So I'm lucky. I'm lucky in that, but hopefully a balance. Yeah. So I was thinking being on the water and enjoying, I guess, being a certain point in life where I can enjoy watching and helping and mentoring others, and including our kids who are now adults. So
That's awesome. And as far as what you see going on in the capital markets and the economic environment and everything else, I mean, kind of how do you see those headwinds? You've seen a couple of these cycles now in your time. Obviously, there's some uniqueness to this one, but I mean, what are you seeing?
yeah, I think what's different about this one is very limited. This one meaning this current, like this last 6 months, the next 12 months. This is a lot like any other major break in the real estate industry, which happens when interest rates are low and lending criteria are lax and everybody's making fees, including the bankers. I'm not being cynical. I mean, it's just what happens. Everyone, look, all the models show you going up and to the right. You just keep investing, and there's oversupply. Now, what happened here, with the big thing that's different here, that won't let it reset in a soft landing, is that the demand's totally changed. It's just the way that people want to consume real estate, office real estate, is totally changed, and it's not going back enough to make a difference. So what I see is that, I was saying, I think it's kind of paraphrasing Columbia University and NYU study showing that it looks like about $1 trillion ultimately will be wiped out of a $4 trillion office industry in terms of equity. It will also dig into the debt. That's going to impact stress on the banks because there is some bank lending. There's also CMBS, which I mentioned before, now would cushion that blow a little bit, but banks will have their stresses. They have tried to extend the loans and hope for the best, but I think the magical thinking and the wait and see choices are a little long in the tooth, and what will come next is asset owners, even the biggest, as we've seen, deciding when there's been too much debt and they can't refinance it, that they give the property back to the to the lender, which is going to be a little bit like 1992, where there's a lot of assets owned by non-asset operators, meaning the banks. They're going to try not to get them back. It'll be a game of hot potato. But what will happen, sorry, I'll get to the answer, is I think what will happen is there is a lot of capital waiting on the sidelines, waiting for it to get just ugly enough, try and catch the bottom and buy these assets back from the bank or buy the debt and take over the assets. So we're working with a lot of new types of owners now, which may be useful for your audience. I mean, we're working with the mezz lender who is now the owner, or the mezz lender who's about to be the owner, or the asset owner who's thinking about converting to residential. These are different kinds of conversations, and we're really right in the middle of them. Even though we might be 10% of the building. So I would say we're probably another 12 months away from the reset of value and these assets having new investors that can move the needle forward. In the meantime, it's a big set of inventory, and there will be opportunity to do pre-built suites, to do some conversions, to do, even some low, owners with low debt capitalization we're working with them now on new deals. So they have decided this is the time to move. So lots of opportunity. It's just, we can't, you got to find your way around it or through it. You can't just say, well, can't grow. Can't run our business. It's over. Gotta keep going.
What'll happen to the inventory that doesn't, that goes back to the bank? Nobody wants it. I mean, to your point, demand has shifted, right? So what does that look like, do you think?
Yeah, I'm not a
Your crystal ball. Tell me your
yeah, but
yeah.
I think the passes prologue a little bit. In Westchester County, where I live in New York, there was a very famous kind of platinum mile along this Highway 287, which was all the headquarters, all these big 300, 400,000 million square foot campuses of major companies. They, over the last 10 years, even before the pandemic, owners were tearing them down so that they would not have to pay the real estate tax. They have become grocery stores, they become retail, they become Lifetime Fitness. This one without co-working because it was too early, but they have become totally different uses.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
don't exist. They just don't exist. The other, I think, way to think about it is they're only, I think I wrote a blog in 2017, kind of picking up on Morningstar report of mall predictions about what's going to happen to retail and malls. A very small movement in shift from retail foot traffic to online foot traffic created a destruction of the regional mall future, in which today, there were, I think, 1,900 malls in 2016. There are like 250 now. Just look it up. I mean, that's where we are. That can happen to office. There are just some that won't be, they're obsolete. They'll have to be something else. And some they can't be residential, and they can't be,
Yeah.
they can't be a fitness. They can only have so many of those. So yeah, it's a reckoning is what it is. But there's opportunity. I think the thing to do as an operator is to underwrite the asset as best you can so that you don't end up in a building that is in trouble. Ask how, what are they renewing? We had a deal recently, that it was ready to go, LOI ready to go, and they said, we have a window to refinance right now. We're going to do it. So thankfully they were able to do it, and we were part of the plan. It could have gone the other way.
Yep.
So, or we could have already been open. Yeah.
Right.
So, and that happens too. We're in a tower in Houston. I don't mind saying, and the asset owner lost the building to the lender. The lender said, you know what, this is not going to be an office building anymore. They sold it to a residential developer who's turning it into condominiums, and they gave us notice. That was it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think to that point, I think there's going to be a redistribution of office, right? I don't think necessarily the office supply goes away. I just think it shifts, right? There's going to be more in the suburbs as opposed to we traditionally have had it in urban cores, right? Whether it be downtown or urban city centers, as opposed to having it in the true suburbs, right? And so I think the product's just going to look different, right? And people are going to be, I guess, more flexible in what they're looking for based off of what their overall needs and demands are. What are they with an enterprise? Are they entrepreneurs? Where are they in between all that fun stuff? And so I think that's the interesting part, is going to see how that continues to evolve.
Well, the way we used to look at it, again, a long time ago, was working for a UK-based company, a Regus back then. They called it bums in seats, because that's kind of a pejorative to call someone a bum. I guess you can't really do that, but point being, butts in seats, whatever. If you're only getting so many hours of the day instead of 40 hours of the day of that person in a seat as an office owner, you were only getting 60% anyway before pandemic. And if you're 50% of pre-pandemic utilization or day visits, you're at half of that now. That's 30%. And if you're there only half the day, you're at 15%. I don't think there's an argument for more office space. There may be new office space, but there's got to be a net loss of office space because I don't think anyone believes, except for maybe Jamie Dimon, that we're all going back to the office. And if you don't want to work for JP Morgan, then you're with everybody else.
Yeah, no, it's been interesting just to see all the different CEOs and articles and everything of back to the office, right? And so
that's a huge point. Look, this is like politics a little bit. I saw a chart from CBRE that was published maybe 3 weeks ago, and it showed this bell curve, almost this chart of what companies believe the end state will be for return to office. Fully remote on one end to fully in the office on the other end. Well, fully remote was 5%, fully in the office was 7%. Everybody else was in the middle, but the only voices you hear are the 5 and 7% people talking, right? Because it's kind of what gets clicks, and it kind of it's emotional. So it's because the polarization is only maybe in the media and online and through a lot of personal passion, but everybody else is like, no, I'm good. I got this worked out. I got this worked out. I'm doing it the way my boss says I can do it. That's fine with me. We've got it worked out over here.
Well, talent is going to dictate all that, right? That's what it simply comes down to is, that upper tier is the one that's going to decide how and where they want to work.
That's right. Upper tier of employee. Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Right. Well, I really appreciate your time. And I mean, it's always awesome to hear from someone that has as much experience as you have and the success that you've had during different time periods too, with different product types and even offerings with the technology and everything else that you've had along the way. And I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, there's a little bit more to do, but this industry is in good hands, and there's so many smart people, so many talented, passionate people. It's really, I would say, gratifying to me, except that it wasn't anything I did, so I'm really excited for that.
And we're almost there. So
almost there. I think we are there, actually. We just don't even know it yet.
Yeah. Thank you, John. We appreciate it.
Okay, take care. Take care, Jane.